I'm Catherine Hadro. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, coming to the table, President Trump meets with leaders of other NATO countries. Hear what he had to say. Deadly attack. Learn more about the tragic strike on a church in Syria and how the region is reacting. Our Lord is our hope. Pope Leo has a message for those who feel worn down by daily life. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast day of St. William of Vercelli, also known as St. William the Abbot. Our top story tonight, President Donald Trump returns to Washington, D.C. tonight after the NATO Summit in Europe. Leaders there agreed to spend more money on defense. The president also responded to the conflict in the Middle East. U.S. and Iranian negotiators will soon meet to talk, this as the ceasefire between Israel and Iran appears to be holding. White House correspondent Owen Jensen joins us in studio with the latest. Owen.
Catherine, good evening to you. President Donald Trump called it a highly productive NATO summit. At a news conference with the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense joining him on stage, President Trump, while acknowledging he knows Israel and Iran could start fighting again, he said he believes the two are done battling each other, and here's why.
And we think it's over. I don't think they're going to be going back at each other. I don't think so.
And asked by a reporter why he believes that?
Because I dealt with both, and they're both tired, exhausted. They fought very, very hard and very viciously, very violently, and they were both satisfied to go home and get out.
And President Trump emphasizes that U.S. strikes delivered a devastating blow to Iran's nuclear program. But a leaked preliminary intelligence assessment said Iran suffered a delay of only a few months. The Secretary of Defense defends the administration, saying leakers have agendas who want to make the president look bad.
Because all of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated.
Also in the Netherlands, where they took a group photo, NATO leaders agree on a massive hike in defense spending to 5% of their GDP. This after pressure from President Trump. Spain claimed an exception and said it would increase spending to 2%. President Trump not too happy about that. Said he'd have the country make up for it by paying higher tariffs to the United States as part of a trade deal.
I'm going to negotiate directly with Spain. I'm going to do it myself. They're going to pay. They'll pay more money this way. You should tell them to go back and pay. You're a reporter. Tell them to go back. They ought to join all of those countries that are paying 5%.
Separately, President Trump met on the sidelines of the summit with Ukraine's president. President Trump is considering sending Kyiv more U.S.-made Patriot air defense missile systems.
Also tonight, President Trump has asserted that U.S. and Iranian officials will talk next week. No specific details just yet. Also, the UN nuclear watchdog says it has written to Iran to discuss resuming inspections. Catherine, back to you.
Thank you, Owen. For more, let's now bring in George Beebe, the director of the Grand Strategy Program at Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Thanks for being with us. I first want to start with President Trump's meeting with the Ukrainian president. Russia has consistently opposed the idea of Ukraine becoming a member, fearing it would bring NATO forces too close to its borders. Do you think the path to peace would be quicker if Ukraine dropped its bid?
Well, yes, I think that is going to have to be part of any kind of peace settlement for Ukraine. That is a central Russian concern. It has been dating all the way back to the early 1990s. This is not a new thing. It's not something that Putin invented. This is a consistent Russian position. And it's not just that Ukraine needs to drop its attempts to join the alliance. I think the Russians also want the United States and other NATO allies to say that the door is closed to Ukrainian membership. That by itself won't end the war, but it certainly has to be a part of a deal.
Just 2 days ago, NATO's Secretary General said Ukraine's path to join NATO was irreversible. President Trump said early in his presidency that Ukraine would not be joining NATO anytime soon. So which way do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think it's already clear that Ukraine is not going to be a part of NATO. The United States has demonstrated repeatedly that we're not going to go to war with Russia to defend Ukraine. That was true under Barack Obama in 2014. It was true under President Biden since the full-scale invasion began of Ukraine, and it's true under President Trump today. So I don't think there's any question that Ukraine's future is not going to be as a member of the NATO alliance.
George, what was your biggest takeaway from the NATO summit?
Well, I think it was notable for the one thing that really did happen, which is this agreement on the part of allies to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP. That was the thing that the United States most wanted out of this meeting, and we got it. And it was also notable for what didn't happen, which was there was not discussion about Ukraine's future in the alliance. There was not discussion about NATO going out of area into other parts of the world. So it looks to me like the summit means that NATO is going to be focusing on self-defense on NATO territory, and there's going to be a lot more burden sharing with the Europeans bearing a lot more responsibility for that self-defense mission.
The cornerstone of the alliance is Article 5, stating that an attack on one of the 32 NATO allies is an attack on all. Right before President Trump left the summit, he stated there are numerous definitions of Article 5. Is there more than one definition of Article 5? Is it open to interpretation, in your opinion?
Well, yes, to some degree, it has to be open to interpretation because you have to decide what an attack is. Is this premeditated aggression on the part of another country against a NATO member? Is this a case where there's an escalatory spiral in which a NATO member takes steps that provoke military action? You always have to interpret the circumstances, so that's going to be a part of all of this. And then once an attack occurs, you have to decide what you're going to do. Article 5 does not require states to actually declare war in response to an attack. It requires them to consult with one another and decide how best to handle the attack.
George Beebe, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Amid the conflict in the Middle East over Iran's nuclear capabilities, church leaders in Japan are urging the international community to abolish nuclear weapons. They add the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki during World War II are, quote, a tragedy that must not be repeated. In a statement marking the upcoming 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Japan says in part, quote, we carry deeply engraved in our hearts the heavy history and pain that atomic bomb survivors and citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have suffered, and hereby declare our strong commitment to the abolition of nuclear weapons. The bombing of Hiroshima in August 1945 killed an estimated 140,000 people. The bishops add the existence of nuclear weapons is, quote, a serious threat to all life. President Trump is putting the pressure on Congress to get the big, beautiful bill to his desk by July 4th. A number of provisions are being worked on in the Senate. Still, Republicans remain optimistic.
That's not uncommon. We were prepared for this to come out. We're still working close with our colleagues. We're working close with the White House every day. There's no daylight between either chamber or the White House. Now we're just putting the package together, getting the final numbers, and waiting on the parliamentarian to get the rest of the information to us.
But many Republicans are holding the line against Medicaid cuts, which they believe will hurt working class and poor families.
And I continue to stand by my line in the sand, which is no Medicaid benefit cuts. Listen, if you want to do work requirements, I'm all for that. I bet every Republican and I bet most Americans would agree with that. But we're not talking here about just work requirements. The House goes much, much, much further than that. This is real Medicaid benefit cuts. I can't support that.
It will close 300 rural hospitals right off the top. How? Because of the debt numbers with this bill, which is $3.4 trillion, it triggers Medicare cuts of $500 billion, which directly gut punch these rural hospitals.
Government data estimates more than 16 million people could lose health insurance through Medicaid cuts and higher premiums. Senate Republican leadership hopes to start debate on the bill Friday and plan to keep lawmakers in D.C. until it's passed. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi confirms there is an ongoing investigation into 5 late-term aborted babies recovered from a D.C. abortion clinic 3 years ago.
General Bondi, will you commit to working with me and this committee to conduct a full and fair investigation into the deaths of these children to ensure justice is served for the DC-5?
Yeah, and Congressman, that is a ongoing investigation and pending, so I cannot discuss that in this forum. But on a collateral matter, the woman who retrieved those 5 fetuses was convicted, and she was pardoned by President Trump.
This follows numerous calls by pro-life groups calling for investigations into the DC-5 after the Biden DOJ apparently did not investigate. Pope Leo reminds the faithful Jesus can heal and revive us. All we have to do is ask for his help.
E immediatamente esce da lui la sua grazia.
In his weekly talk to pilgrims, the Holy Father reflected on a pair of miracles: the healing of the woman suffering from hemorrhaging and the raising of a young girl from the dead. He says both are examples of people who trusted in the Lord and received healing. The Holy Father also said he is concerned that so many in today's world believe life is too difficult and complex. He says by turning to Jesus, they can face reality and avoid the so-called fatigue of living. Now to Syria, where officials say a sleeper cell from the Islamic State group was behind the deadly attack on a church in Damascus. The group had plans to target a Shiite shrine in a similar attack. At least 25 people died in Sunday's strike on the Elias Greek Orthodox Church. Funerals for the victims began this week, with one church leader calling Sunday's attack, quote, a heinous massacre. EWTN's Asi Mena team in the Middle East has more.
The heart of Damascus was heavy with grief on Tuesday, June 24. In Al Zaytun Square, the faithful gathered at the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate to honor 25 victims of Sunday's devastating bombing at St. Elias the Prophet Church in the neighborhood of Al Duwaila, Damascus. Yesterday, mourners marched through the streets, chanting Christian hymns in honor of the martyrs. The attack unfolded during Sunday evening's Divine Liturgy as families gathered for worship. In an instant, a suicide bomber's blast transformed the gathering of faithful into a scene of unspeakable tragedy, leaving 63 wounded in addition to the dead.
The people were deep in prayer, reaching out to the heaven, when suddenly someone from the depths of hell stormed in, trying to darken the clarity of our skies. But the sky we pray beneath will not be dimmed. And the greatest proof for our resilience, here we are, the very next day, gathering once again in the same church, lifting our voices in prayer.
Under Assad's rule, Syria's Christians lived with uncertainty, but this attack, the first inside of a church in decades, has left them feeling completely vulnerable. What little security they once knew has now vanished entirely.
Our suffering is beyond words. 7 from our family are gone. I want Ahmad al-Shara to come himself and investigate. If he truly is the president of this country, and if he cares about its Christians, then let him act. I don't care about ministers offering condolences. I don't care if they visited my relatives in the hospital. None of that matters. What matters is giving my husband and his family their rights. I regret the old state and I'm broken by the new one.
Though Syria has opened a new chapter, peace remains fragile. Today's attack has shaken Damascus' old Christian community. Yet even in grief, they gather, proving that faith endures beyond fear.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly, including Primary Focused, a closer look at the surprise result last night in the race to be New York City mayor. We have analysis from Tom Bevan. welcome back. It was just a primary race and it was just for mayor. But what happened in New York City could offer a glimpse at what lies ahead for American politics. Last night, 33-year-old Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani snagged a decisive lead in the Democratic primary for mayor, beating out establishment candidate Andrew Cuomo. The final results won't be known until early July due to the city's ranked choice voting system. However, Cuomo conceded the race to his opponent after the first round of voting. Joining us now is Tom Bevan, the co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Tom Bevan, thank you for joining us. First off, a young, progressive, left-wing candidate beat out an older, established Democrat, and many on the left say this race should be a wake-up call for the Democratic Party. What would you say to that?
Well, it definitely was a bit of a surprise. I mean, he was polling when this race started, he was an asterisk in the polls and really came on late with the endorsement of AOC and Bernie Sanders and many in the progressive left. And as you mentioned, Andrew Cuomo, who got the backing of Bill Clinton and Mike Bloomberg and sort of the more establishment Democrats, didn't perform well at all. He absolutely got killed in this race. And as you mentioned, conceded right away. So Democrats are split on this. There are many Democrats who say, look, this is the future. We need to embrace it. Folks on the left wing, they're excited about him. Other Democrats are worried that this is going to push the party even further left, and that if they don't find a way to prevent Mamdani from becoming mayor with a centrist candidate of some sort, including backing Eric Adams, who's going to be running in the general election as an independent, that they will taint themselves and won't be much of a national party for the 2026 and 2028 elections.
Mamdani describes himself as a democratic socialist. Tom, can you explain to us what that leftist movement specifically believes?
Well, he believes that the state should control things and provide. I mean, he's run his campaign basically on the affordability in New York, and his solutions for that are raising the minimum wage to $30 an hour, giving free bus and transportation rides, establishing a citywide network of grocery stores to drive down the price of groceries. He wants universal child care, and he wants to freeze rent. So he's promised all of these goodies, but he hasn't proposed a single way that this would get paid for, other than taxing the rich, which would only get them so far. And obviously, the net effect of that would be driving some high earners out of the state of New York, as they have been fleeing over the past few years to Florida. So it would exacerbate a problem that's already existing.
We should note that Mamdani did not capture a majority of the votes. Does that indicate that the democratic socialism still does have an upward fight ahead?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, as you mentioned, so this was the first round. And so as candidates are eliminated, Brad Lander, who was the other candidate, and they had sort of made a pact, he and Mamdani had made a pact. I think Mamdani's going to end up with over 50% of the vote, certainly. In the end, we'll see how high it goes. But look, this is where the energy in the party, again, he's young, he's charismatic. He ran a very good campaign. He was very focused on social media and the like. And he got a good response from young voters across the city of New York. So this is where the energy is in the party. As you see, as I mentioned, AOC and Bernie Sanders out flying around, holding these fight the oligarchy rallies. But the question is, does that make them out of the mainstream for national elections? And will a far left progressive running the biggest city in America, how will that impact Democratic politics nationally?
We have less than a minute left, Tom, but how do you foresee this impacting midterms?
Well, I mean, in the short term, there could be spillover to the New Jersey governor's race, which is happening this November right across the river. And Republicans, think they might have a chance of winning that race. That's a state that shifted 10 points in the 2024 election in favor of Donald Trump. They have a candidate in Jack Ciarelli who only lost by 3 points the last time he ran. So they're hopeful that they would have a good showing there, and they may be able to leverage Mamdani if he ends up winning this race, as he's expected to do, leverage his progressive ideology in their favor in that New Jersey governor's race. But again, we'll see how it goes for national politics as well.
We will see. Tom Bevan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Though democratic socialists claim to be distinct from traditional socialists, there is still a lot of crossover between the two, including collective ownership of the economy. The church has been clear in its condemnation of traditional socialism. In his famous 1891 encyclical on capital and labor, Rerum Novarum, Pope Leo XIII said it is clear that the main tenet of socialism, community of goods, must be utterly rejected, since it only injures those whom it would seem meant to benefit, is directly contrary to the natural rights of mankind, and would introduce confusion and disorder into the commonweal. The first and most fundamental principle, therefore, if one would undertake to alleviate the condition of the masses, must be the inviolability of private property. Though Pope Leo XIII spoke against socialism, he did also condemn unrestrained capitalism that would exploit the worker in favor of the wealthy. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, it's something that sets the Catholic Church apart from most other religions. But celibacy in the priesthood can also be a point of contention. Today, Pope Leo XIV weighed in. Plus, the cast and crew of The Chosen make a special appearance at the Vatican to meet the Holy Father. Pope Leo XIV affirms celibacy for Catholic priests.
E della condotta è così vivere la sequela di Cristo e offrire a tutti.
The Holy Father made the remarks in a meeting at the Vatican with around 400 cardinals and bishops from 38 countries. The Holy Father also said the leaders must be ready to take decisive action to combat clergy sexual abuse. He added the primary role of a bishop is to forge unity in the diocese among clergy and be close to the flock in word and in deed. The church leaders were in Rome as part of the Holy Year celebrations for clergy. Finally tonight, the cast and crew of a hit TV series depicting the life of Christ made a special appearance this week in Rome. They are discussing the 5th season of The Chosen and also met the Holy Father. Catholic actor Jonathan Rumi, who plays the role of Jesus, spoke to EWTN News about his meeting with Pope Leo.
There was a lot that was said in a short amount of time, and most of it is a blur, but I told him that I think I told him that I was humbled to be there, and it was great to meet him. He hadn't seen the show that I'm on, but his brother was a fan of it, and so he's like, he knew of the show, and I said, well, we brought some DVDs to help remedy that.
Were you like,
situation.
do you have a DVD player in there, or do you want me to hook one up? Or?
I didn't want to go into if he has an Amazon account or anything like that, because, you know, just didn't want to get, so we got old school media, and so he was very gracious.
Be sure to tune in tomorrow, where we will have more on the trip to Rome, Season 5, and more of our exclusive interview with Jonathan Rumi. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Catherine Hadro. Good night, and God bless.